Right, the bells have tolled, so it's just gone 6:30. So just welcome everybody here tonight. I think most of you know who I am by now, hopefully. I'm Paul Harper, the chair of the, no, I must get it right, Planning and Healthier, Strong Communities Policy Advisory Committee. Perhaps next year we can add an extra couple of words to the title, be even better. Anyway, I'm happy to welcome everybody here tonight. We've just checked and we're going to be broadcast live on the council's webcast, and that will be available on the YouTube channel. I just wanted to check if anybody else tonight wishes to also do any private videoing or broadcasting or anything. No, that's fine. And then as we know, if the fire alarm does go off, Cassie will go and check what if it's a real alarm or well, false alarm or whatever, and then she'll inform us what we need to do. We're changing the running order tonight slightly, so we're going to go through the agenda up until item 10, when we'll take Natalie's heritage interpretation project, and then after that we'll take the two SPD documents, the Heathlands and Lidsing SPDs, and then we'll go back to the remainder of the items. So without further ado, and I check for apologies for tonight. We've got apologies from Councillor Keeley, who's obviously not here, and then substitute members.
Councillor Jones for Councillor Keeley.
Sorry. Okay, sorry. We've had these additional papers sent around, these urgent items. So what I'm proposing we do, after we've had Natalie's report on the Heritage Interpretation Project, if we then have a pause for 5 minutes to give everyone a chance to read through those documents before we actually take the Lidsing and Heathlands items. Otherwise, it's unfair in terms of the extra information. So the next item, number 4, is can I have notification of visiting members? I don't think we've got any, have we? And there's none on the screen, so let's tick that one off. Next item, 5, is disclosures by members and officers in respect of all the items on our ream and a half of paper. None. Excellent. And then item 6, any disclosures of lobbying by anybody in terms of this? Right. Can I assume that the lobbying is in respect of Lidsing and Heathlands SPD documents? Yeah, if that's okay, if you could just note that, Cassie. And has anybody been lobbied on anything else?
Yeah, I've been lobbied on item 14 as well.
I mean, I think we've probably all been lobbied on 14 and 15 on Heathlands and Lidsing. So then item 7 is to consider whether any item should be taken in private. I think everything on the agenda needs to be discussed in public. Is that agreed by everybody? Excellent. And that then takes us on to minutes of our meeting held on the 7th of January 2026, pages 1 to 6. So we just run through for accuracy. So page 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 and 6. Okay, is everybody happy with that? Then I shall sign these as correct at the end of the meeting. Thank you. Next item, number 9, is the forward plan relating to the committee's terms of reference on pages 7 to 12. Oh, sorry, before that, Councillor Brennan. that's a good point you picked. I think it's a typo because clearly, if we're taking it on the 4th of March, it'll be going to the March cabinet meeting rather than the cabinet meeting next week, which will be entertaining. Trying to do a time leap in reverse. Thanks for picking that up. Anything else from anybody in terms of the leader or the two cabinet members we've got with us? If not, can we agree to note item 9? So that's noted. Which brings us on to the Heritage Interpretation Project, which is pages 13 to 29 of our papers. And this is to be introduced, I think, by Councillor Stephen Thompson, who's on the screen. So, Stephen, if you'd like to say a few words. thank you for that, Stephen. I don't know, Natalie, if there's anything you'd like to add at this point, or
I think Stephen's covered most of the points that I was going to say. Just consultation process, the spaces chosen are in here, very much examples of interpretation, nothing set in stone, and we're also very aware that people's tastes differ. And as Stephen said, we're going to be taking some time to pull out stories. It's not just about choosing a space and putting up some interpretation. It's about eking out the stories of our communities and making sure that they're reflected in that interpretation. And then just realistically, we've got the available options and then our preferred option here at 4.1, just letting us move the project forwards to have a steering group that will involve museum staff, planning, parks, whoever else you might think is appropriate, and then just to get cracking, really.
yeah, no, thank you for that. Couple of what I was before I open it to debate, I'm just going to suggest perhaps we do something after we've had some discussion on this, which will help Natalie and her colleagues by doing actually a quick poll here of the members of the committee in terms of the 4 areas suggested, so that they have an understanding. And also, I wondered, looking at the pictures of the different types of design, I just thought again it would be useful for if people think, for us to do a quick poll of those, just so that as the members probably most involved with this, that Natalie's got an idea of where we would be perhaps coming from on that. So we'll do that at the end of the discussion. So at this point, I'll open it up to debate. So I've got Claudine Russell first of all, Councillor Russell.
Sorry, my point isn't to do with the discussion. One of our team members is watching at home, and they said that they can't hear people that are speaking on the webcast, only people that are here in the room. So can we just check that?
So just checking that. Usually with a cabinet member presenting, if the public can't hear, it's I've got Councillor Clark. Adjourn for a couple of minutes. Oh, okay. Do you want to say something then?
If you can ask Councillor Thompson if he could just say something.
Yeah, Steve, can you say something? Because we want to see if we can pick you up on the system, Councillor Thompson.
That's not a request I get very often, Councillor Harper. I'm glad to oblige.
I didn't ask you to sing. Did that come out? Yeah, it did come out, didn't it? I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think it's okay. So it is coming out now. Right, so I've got Councillor Clark first of all.
Thank you, Chairman. I did give quite a bit of feedback leading into this, so I won't go into sort of very specific science, but it does, looking at the paper, it did make me think that there needs to be a certain amount of thought given to how it all ties together. So if say you're a child in Maidstone in the summer holidays, perhaps you would want to have a way where, I mean, I don't want to sort of invent it here, but basically they could, like when we've got the elephants and they can go from one after the other. But I'm mindful that we don't just want to have an app. We want to have this where people from all generations can be involved and find out how these things tie together. So we need to have something quite uniform in the way that we structure it, not the individual pieces, but we just need to sort of make sure that we sort of tie it all together. But it did make me think, actually, one of the things that comes up on some of the Maidstone Past sites on Facebook and the like, there used to be this map in Mill Street that you press the buttons and it had little lights, and people still talk fondly about that. And I just wonder if there might be something like that. I mean, I think the older generation would really that would be quite an enjoyable thing, I think, to see something like that. And I think that if you are going to have web access and an app, you can find a way on that frontage where you can guide people to it. But just the idea of finding finding sites within the town centre and seeing a little light, it's the most simple thing. But I just think that that's the sort of thing we should be thinking, as well as all the individual instances.
That's a good point. And yeah, so we go to Councillor Green and then Councillor Wilkinson. Thank you, Councillor Wilkinson.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to highlight about some of the amazing statues that are in Canterbury that we can look to and kind of, there's one that's called, what is it called? Afre Ben, and that was opened by Queen Camilla on February the 25th, 25. And she was a playwright, poet and spy born near Canterbury. And then there's a statue of Alluvia, a sculpture installed in the River Stour. And I don't know if anyone else has seen that one, but that's pretty amazing as well. But I thought we could, look at that to see where we could go.
Thank you for that. Anyone else want to speak at the moment? No. Did you put your hand up again? Go on then.
I think there's two key parts of Maidstone. Well, three actually. You've got farming, you've got brewing, and you've got paper making. I think most people have got family members that in some way will be connected to those sort of three pillars. So I think that they should be very prominent as part of this. And it reminds me, Dr. Maureen Green she has a PhD in paper making, and she lives locally. I could give you oh, okay, you know her.
We've she did when we opened the local history gallery. She did a talk for us, and she's been quite involved actually.
Okay. I may possibly have mentioned that actually, but yeah, in terms of I remember in Tovel, which has got a rich paper making history. I spoke with her, and we had a housing associate, Housing 21 there in Burial Ground Lane, where there's a lot of elderly people, and they often try to find things for them to sort of see and do and that sort of thing. So I asked Mo if she'd come along and do a presentation. I'd set up everything for her, and she gave a presentation about paper making in Tovel. And what was really fascinating was that many of the people that were watching there actually pointed out people in the black and white pictures to say that's my grandfather. So it's kind of interesting that you've still got that link in the town. So I'm really glad to hear that.
Okay. I don't know what people think of my idea of perhaps looking at thinking quickly or doing a quick show of hands on those four areas on paragraph 210 for, as part of giving feedback to Natalie, which I know at when I had my briefing on Monday, it's one of the things Natalie's keen to have as much information and knowledge from what the committee wants. So are people happy to do that? Because I'm quite happy to do it. So if I just ask people to sort of vote in favour of, 1 to 4. So in terms of, because we've got to only go ultimately for 3 areas. So the first one will be the Archbishop's Palace and environs. I see people in favour of that one. Excellent, great. Okay. Next one is the Town Hall and Gabriel's Hill. 7. Excellent. Then we've got the Power Hub and the River. I'm not surprised since that's where you live. Okay. then lastly, the museum and Brentford Gardens, and perhaps Natalie better look away at this one. Right, okay. Hopefully that was gives you a bit of a feel, Natalie, in terms of those items. And the other thing I was thinking about picking up some of the points which were raised is if we look at the figures you put in, and excellent that they're in colour so you can actually see them. They do show the sort of completely different types of approaches, you know, we could go for. And I think picking up Councillor Clark's point, we need, well, there's two, isn't it? You need an element in terms of your signage from site to site, and then in terms of each of the sites. And it's, I suppose, a question of whether on each site do we go for a sort of, I mean, it's like a house theme, as it were, or does it, yeah. And it really looking at these types of approach, which have been used elsewhere, are there any people would perhaps at this stage be less favourable for? Well, yeah, Claudine.
I'm just not sure we can do that at this stage, only because it's interpretation. So some of these seem to me to be more like sculptural than interpretation. I think we should just leave that open. And also things are, I mean, I have no idea how much any of these cost, but that figure 12, the Kent history tree, that looks very expensive. It may not be, but you know, if you've got a budget, I think maybe just leave that open and see what comes back from the project team, I would say.
Yeah, Councillor Cunningham.
Thank you, Chair. Just the example in Gainsborough. I've actually been on site there. It's not popular. No, it gets very little. The example in Gainsborough with the turning blocks. The site is popular, but the actual activity isn't.
Actually, okay, my only comment really is that the item on figure 12 on page 25, and I can see obviously what it's called, the Kent history tree, but when you look at it, you wouldn't know that's what it is. Oh, well, perhaps I should rephrase that. I wouldn't know what it is. And so I think if we are going in terms of interpretation, we want stuff which, if we go for visuals, you know, really does interpret and doesn't lead you to think that looks like a tree grown out of the ground. Well, you know, it doesn't really say anything. I'll take Councillor Harwood briefly.
No, I was just going to say it's a checkers tree. For those from the Weald, you should know very well what a checkers tree is, and it's kind of archetypal Wealden tree, and the public houses get the name from it. But yeah, that was an interesting commission where there was a lot of engagement actually, which led to the various leaves on the floor, which have historic events and so on. So yeah, I think it's one that you have to be close to it. And
okay, so it's more like what we've got along Week Street, where we've got the inserts about the history of it, okay, which isn't clear when you look at it from a distance. Okay, well, look, we've got the steering group being set up, and it'll be interesting, obviously, when Natalie's had a chance to work out who, you know, to go on it, whether, obviously, you know, any councillors might be interested in joining the steering group. Perhaps if we can, people pass their names to you so you can take that on. And I know we spoke about trying to get this completed by the end of October this year, so quite a challenging target. So I'm quite happy to move recommendations number 1 and 2. And I'm just wondering whether we do want to put a recommendation about the target date, because sometimes if you have a date, clearly it helps keep you online. So possibly add in a number 3 that the target completion date of October 2026 be set or be agreed. Yeah, is everybody happy with all of that? Excellent, great. Well, look, thank you very much for coming tonight, Natalie, and of course you're welcome to stay for the rest of the meeting if you wish, or welcome to get off home. All right, so as I said before, we take items 14 and 15, if we just adjourn for 5 minutes, just to give people a chance to read all the supplemental papers we've had sent around today. So if we reconvene at about a minute past 7 according to the big clock. Okay, so we'll reconvene, having had a chance to look through those papers, which then takes us on to item 14, which is Heathlands Garden Settlement Supplementary Planning Document, pages 112 through to 516. So first of all, we have a number of members of the public to address us tonight, who, and if we've got Councillor Sarah Emberson from Kent County Council, Councillor Spencer Dixon from Kent County Council, and Steve Healy from Save Our Heathlands. I think you probably all know that you have up to 3 minutes to address the committee. So, and there's a seat just on the corner there with a speaker. So first of all, if we can take Councillor Sarah Emberson, please.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the opportunity to speak this evening. I'm here as the Kent County Councillor for Maidstone Rural East to express very serious concerns shared by myself and the residents I represent regarding the Heathlands proposal and the accompanying SPD. For years, residents have engaged in consultations. We have had detailed feedback from the inspector, yet despite all of this, the SPD presented still lacks the fundamental information needed to demonstrate that this development is viable, deliverable and sustainable. Instead of bringing clarity, it leaves the residents with more questions, greater uncertainty and growing mistrust. Let me highlight the key areas of concern. There is no firm commitment on the infrastructure that is repeatedly described as essential to the viability of Heathlands. We still have no confirmation from Network Rail of a new rail station, no clarity on services, no defined plan for healthcare expansion, and barely any detail of water supply, water removal, or foul water treatment in a county already experiencing water shortages. The approach to roads and traffic is also wholly inadequate. A full assessment of the whole scheme is needed, not one limited to a few access points. Bus services appear to be delayed until the late phases, school and nursery provision remain vague, and there is nothing meaningful for our growing elderly population. The SPZ gives headline figures but not a costed plan. There is no updated viability report and no clarity on how much land is available for housing. Assumptions on developer contributions are unclear. A scheme of this scale cannot proceed on optimistic guesses. Maidstone Borough Council is both promoter of this scheme and the planning authority that will determine it. The dual role demands the highest levels of transparency, yet the SPD provides none. A development of this size must be underpinned by a clear design code and a robust sustainability strategy, but the SPD contains neither. We cannot see how the layout, density, open spaces, transport corridors, and landscape are meant to relate to each other. Landscape-led is stated, but there is no evidence of how it will be delivered. Employment projections of 5,000 jobs are highly aspirational, with no credible route to delivering them in a rural location. And without them, the assumption behind the housing and infrastructure mix collapse. This SPD does not provide a credible or deliverable framework for a development of this scale. It lacks commitment, clarity, and evidence. Residents deserve more than hope. They deserve certainty and honesty about what this scheme will deliver. Please give them that. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your address. Next, could I ask Councillor Spencer Dixon from Kent County Council to come forward and address us for up to 3 minutes? Thank you.
Chair, members, then thank you for the opportunity to speak today. I want to focus on 3 areas where the Heathlands SPD, as drafted, falls short in ways that risk both our heritage and the credibility of the sustainable vision being presented. Firstly, Chapel Hill. We now have clear evidence this area contains potentially significant archaeology, yet the SPD barely acknowledges the site, let alone sets out a robust strategy for its investigation and protection. Our own archaeological teams have raised concerns, but I fear these will not translate into a requirement for targeted trenching before key layout and infrastructure decisions are fixed. I'm asking the committee to require explicit targeted trenching and clearer treatment of Chapel Hill within the SPD so that we do not irreversibly damage assets that could be of substantial local and wider importance. Second, the railway station. The entire narrative of Heathlands as a garden community rests on the high quality, sustainable transport. And with the new station repeatedly referenced as central to reducing car dependence and unlocking the site. Yet there is still no firm commitment that a station will be delivered, no secured funding, and no clear fallback if Network Rail or government support does not materialise. We know from other developments nationally that aspirational stations can quietly disappear, leaving thousands of residents in car-dependent estates that were sold as having good transport links. That is not a risk we should casually take with up to 5,000 homes and a community that will live with the consequences for decades. For existing residents along the A20 corridor and for the future residents of Heathlands, we either need a binding guarantee that the station will be in place at an early phase of the development, or a clearly articulated worst-case plan in the SPD that shows how genuine sustainable transport will be provided if the station does not happen. At present, the SPD offers neither. Third, the consultation. Many of us do not feel that the consultation was thorough enough or that sufficient weight was given to local people who know the area intimately and understand its constraints day to day. The meetings that were held felt more like briefings designed to present a finished scheme rather than genuine opportunities to shape it, with officers and consultants talking at residents rather than listening to them. That approach undermines confidence in the SPD and risks missing practical, locally informed solutions that could have improved both the design and phasing of the development. So my request is fairly simple. Please do not sign off an SPD that treats Chapel Hill's archaeology as an afterthought, or that builds an entire sustainability case on a station that may never arrive. Strengthen the document now with enforceable requirements on archaeological trenching and with a realistic guaranteed transport strategy so that this community is delivered in a way that is honest, resilient and worthy of the promises being made. Thank you.
Thank you. You both managed to do it in virtually your 3 minutes, so that's quite impressive for most of us to remember when we have to do these things at planning. So could I now ask Steve Healy if he would like to come forward, please? And as you know, Steve, because you've done this a lot of times to us, you've got your 3 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, members. I'm here tonight on behalf of Seoul, representing the voices of our community who remain deeply concerned about the proposed Heathlands development. I want to begin by taking you back to last October, when this committee agreed to proceed to public consultation. Many of you raised thoughtful, valid concerns at that time, concerns that residents hoped would lead to real improvements in the SPD before it returned to you this evening. Yet those improvements simply haven't materialised. Councillor Russell specifically highlighted issues with Appendix B, the anticipated developer contributions list, and asked that it be made, in her words, a whole lot better. It hasn't been. Councillor Jones and Councillor Thompson stressed that every consultation response must be fully considered and that the process must be robust. But what we have seen feels less like robust consideration and more like a rushed exercise to get this SPD adopted, come what may. The stakeholder steering group is a perfect example, a tick box exercise at best. It has met once since this consultation closed, and stakeholders and ward members who tried to raise concerns were shut down and lectured, not engaged. Last year, over 1,500 residents signed the Seoul petition, calling for a proper transport modelling to be done first, critical evidence that needs to shape the infrastructure planning for a development of this scale. That modelling has still not been done. And it isn't just residents and members raising concerns. Many of the statutory consultees whose views should carry significant weight have flagged serious issues that appear to have been ignored. Natural England, parish councils and Seoul have all highlighted the complete absence of a strategic master plan, something fundamental for an SPD of this scale. The Kent Downs AONB unit, quote, strongly disagree with the SPD's claims that the site is visually contained. Southern Water dispute the council's claims of engagement and maintain they were unaware of the proposal to move the wastewater treatment works until this consultation. CPRE said the location is inherently unsustainable and wholly unsuitable for development of this magnitude, and Kent County Council, whose partnership is absolutely essential, take issue with almost every part of the SPD, as you've just heard from the two preceding speakers. They require fundamental revisions that haven't barely been acknowledged, let alone incorporated. And since this consultation has closed, problems on the ground have only worsened. As you all know, communities in Harwich,ham, Hollingbourne and Headcorn have suffered repeated water network failures, the predictable outcome of an overstretched, underinvested system. And yesterday, the William Harvey Hospital in Ashford closed the A&E unit, which is closest to Heathlands, because of a critical incident over exceptional demand in the emergency department. If ever there was a moment to strengthen this SPD to secure essential infrastructure first, it is now. Yet the opportunity that once again has been missed by this council. Tonight's reports also carry flawed warnings about rushing this through before changes to national plan making take place. But if SPDs are to be downgraded in the new system, then a supplementary plan may offer a clearer and stronger route. As Councillor Jeffries said in October, the public consultation was the opportunity to make this the best document it could be.
If you could wind
I've
up?
got a final paragraph, thank you. For the sake of the communities who live with the consequences for generations, please pause this the adoption of this SPD. Strengthen it, require the evidence, demand the infrastructure, and give the residents the confidence that this council is truly listening. Thank you.
Thank you for that. I think all three speakers have left us with probably quite a few issues to consider this evening. But obviously our main purpose tonight, looking at this, is to really consider the response from the consultation rather than the principle of the development either at Lidsing or Heath, in this case Heathlands, because those were the principle of the development was agreed back at the full council meeting on March 2024, and the SPD is the building blocks following on from the local plan to ensure that we can guide the development going forward. But I'm about to ask Councillor Harwood to introduce the report, and I'd ask him perhaps if he could give any thoughts about the issue around the ancient monument at Chapel Hill, which I notice has been raised. And the other thing I perhaps would ask Councillor Harwood to consider is on page 153, where we've got the indicative plan of the green spaces, because again, that was one of the points. But, you know, to me, I'd be interested to hear what the Cabinet member says. I think that shows a fairly clear approach in terms of the green infrastructure around the development. But anyway, I'll hand over to Councillor Harwood.
Councillor Harwood here. Oh, sorry, Councillor Jeffrey here. I thought I'd introduce this rather than the Tony.
Sorry,
If that's
okay.
all right with you.
Apologies, Councillor Jeffrey.
Tony and I split up the SPD steering groups, well, with Simon as well. We've taken one each, and I've got Heathlands, so I tend to introduce the Heathland stuff. Yeah, I'll do my best, although I'm probably going to hand over to Karen for many of them. You covered most of what I was going to say in terms of the process from local plan review to SPD. The SPD becomes a material planning consideration. It can't introduce new policy, but it can put bones on that. We have had a steering group running for over 12 months now. We've had experts inputting into this. The consultation obviously was key. That's closed, was it a month or so ago? 58 responses, but 60,000 words. That's about 1,000 words per person. The SPD itself, the steering group itself, just to say, remind the committee, has got KCC officers and councillors and Lenham councillors on there, and you've read the mixed letter, which I read as fairly supportive, but clearly points out a few bits. In terms of Chapel Hill in particular, my understanding, obviously the archaeology and the side of it is referenced. but my understanding that would fall under outline planning and planning application level rather than specifically an SPD requirement. I'm going to hand over to Karen just to clarify on the other two bits you raised.
Thank you. Yes, if you'd like me to just add, I suppose, to you've said in terms of summary for the actual report, before I pick up some of the points that have been made, perhaps, as you said, we had a reasonable response to the consultation that took place between 3rd of November and 15th of December. As you know, for a supplementary planning document, we're required to do minimum 4-week consultation as a statutory duty. We consulted for 6 weeks to enable further opportunities for people to comment on this document, because it's obviously a very important document within the borough and for our local communities. We had 58 responses, as mentioned, with 487 different comments coming through, and over 60,000 words has been mentioned. So a lot to wade through for officers to analyse the documents. As part of this process, we're obviously bringing this back, and I'm not going to go in detail through the whole document itself, but bringing this back to you now. As you say, this forms part of the framework for future planning applications. So you've got the local plan that was adopted back in March 24. That, with all the policies and all the phasing and timing that's set out in that particular plan, sits alongside this supplementary planning document, if adopted, to provide the framework ready for future planning applications to come in. It's worth remembering that this site, and will also be the same for Lidsing, goes in terms of completions development over a lot of years. So we have to, through the SPD, be very flexible about the future, and we have to provide that framework for the future planning applications. And this is why it's written in the way that it is written. And together, the local plan and the SPD provide that framework to enable us to assess the planning applications. If you would like, I can run through. We received a letter this afternoon from Kent County Council, which is, as was sort of preceded by the speakers. I'm happy to go through sections of that if that is helpful for members.
It would be quite helpful, Karen, if you could, you know, go through the letter from KCC, because there's obviously a lot of technical information in there. And I think the committee would welcome your thoughts on that.
Okay. So just going through section by section, I'm just going to summarise, I suppose, a response to each of those sections. So highways and transportation seems to be obviously fairly supportive of us, and there is the opportunity for a transport steering group and also an infrastructure delivery group as part of the SPD that we're proposing as part of changes. So that will be something that then there could be further involvement in for the detailed points that a lot of has been said would cover. So just to reiterate, I suppose, in terms of timings, phasings, delivery issues, a lot of those issues have been mentioned by Kent County Council this evening, but also through other people that have responded to the consultation. And those phasing issues are set out in the local plan policy itself. So it says when things are expected to come forwards. So that provides that framework. The supplementary planning document can't go further than that in terms of detailed timings, phasings, because that's not the job of a supplementary planning document to do that. So that is where that point lies, really. The issues of when things come forward, how things come forward, was dealt with through the local plan examination process. So it's not for us to reopen those matters, as you said at the start, Councillor Harper. In terms of heritage, and particularly in relation to the Chapel Hill that you mentioned, and as Councillor to my left said, this is better dealt with through the planning application stage, and the detail of any requirements in terms of archaeology. We've got a reference in the document to archaeology requirements, but the actual devil in the detail would be through the planning application process. So it's too early to specify what specific requirements are needed in terms of archaeology. Partially as again, because this development is going to run over a lot of years. And in that time, there may be other archaeology that is found in that area. We don't know yet, so we can't specify everything and be firm on everything. In terms of minerals and waste matters, I think there is a point that they make within their letter that they sent this afternoon, which referred to some mapping. That is a point that we'd like to go back to KCC and actually get clarification on. They reference there's an inaccuracy in one of the plans, but they don't reference what plan that is, what figure it is. So we don't know what that is. So we'd be happy to get that clarified by them so that we can potentially bring that back for the cabinet meeting next week. If there is an issue, that may be a factual amendment that we just need to make if there is an error in any of our mapping. And we'd be happy to consider that in the same way as we'd be happy to reference the minerals safeguarding area. The SPD currently refers to the minerals plan. That's obviously part of the development plan document. So applicants will need to refer to that anyway, but we would be happy to make reference to safeguarded areas as well as part of our slight amendment to text. So it's a very minor factual update again, just to add that. In terms of waste, again, that's something that will be considered through the planning application process, and it's also considered through our infrastructure delivery plan, which is prepared and updated in consultation with organisations such as Kent County Council. So that's an update that's regularly done with them. There's reference to the lead local flood authority. Again, that's a detailed matter relating to the planning application stage. It's not pertinent to the SPD to stray into such matters as environmental permits. That's not the point of an SPD. Highways and transportation matters. There's various comments about the road junction. Again, that was a principle that was agreed and discussed at the local plan examination, so that's not for us to be revisiting through the supplementary planning document. We note heritage. There's no comment on that. That's said to be acceptable by King. Sorry. Oh, sorry. I've gone further than I thought. Apologies. I think does that cover everything? Have I missed something? Sorry about that. Getting ahead of myself. Yeah.
Karen, I didn't know if you wanted to introduce some of the officers who are attending virtually.
By all means, yes, sorry. Yes, online we've got Robert Smith and Tom Jones. They both work for HIAS. We appointed HIAS to work with us on the supplementary planning documents. So they're there in the background. Helen Smith is online. She'll be covering some of the other reports later on. Thank you.
Okay.
So,
thank you. Right, I'll open this up to the floor, and I'll just remind people really to focus probably on the last couple of pages. So in Appendix 7, which is 513 through to 516, because those are the proposed modifications as a result of the outcome of consultation. So I'm looking for anyone who wishes to speak at this stage. Yeah, Councillor Poley.
Thank you, Chair. I kind of gathered I might get called first. Yeah, first of all, I'm sure all the members and the officers in the chamber at the moment and those online would join me in welcoming our leader of the council back, who's after his ordeal last night. It's great to see him back in his proper place. Okay, last October, we had a by-election in the Harwich, Lenham and North Downs Weald. I and my colleagues were elected on a massive mandate to oppose Heathlands. We got over 50% of the vote. We got more votes than all the rest of the candidates put together. And it's quite clear how what the feeling is towards Heathlands in the ward. There was also, of course, a petition raised by Save Our Heathlands, which I looked today, and it's not far off 1,700 people now. So that shows the feeling in the ward. We're not going to let the people down that voted for us. Having said that, we have to accept that bloody mindingly stopping a document which is there to specify our requirements may not be conducive to stopping Heathlands, and is only going to serve to deliver a worse solution for the people. And we do respect that, and I think we have to be positive and accept that some of the consultation comments were taken on board, and there's been some improvements made. So I need to acknowledge that. I'm new to this chamber, relatively new to planning, but I do have some attributes which I think I can bring to the table. One is I spent my whole working life working on requirements documents. I represented my company on an international standards body as the chairman of the steering group. I know what a good requirement looks like. It was often an interview question. There are a number of attributes to a good requirement. One is that it should be totally ambiguous. So 12 people should read a requirement and know exactly what it means. It should be totally unambiguous, and it should be testable. You should be able to define a test to see whether that requirement's met. Now, when I used to interview stakeholders, they would quite often try to give me woolly requirements. And my favourite questions were things like, okay, what would the success criteria be? How would we know that we met that requirement? Which leads them to a bit more detailed thinking. Or if I was a test engineer, how would I define a test to test that requirement? And this defines a lower level of thinking. I worked on a number of Prince2 projects which require dependencies. Now, on this project, there are a number of dependencies on other agencies, outside companies, which require financial planning. And that's one area that I really think this document is quite deficient in, that it's not supported by a clear set of dependencies, and those dependencies agreed and underpinned by external agencies. We don't see a lot of financial planning in terms of who funds what. A key example of that, of course, is the railway station. I think the estimation in the SPD for the railway station, I believe it's grossly underestimated, and I think that needs revisiting. The other thing I always look for in my working life was a risk register. I think there's a whole host of risks on this project, and I'd like to see a risk register and those risks identified and mitigated with a risk analysis. Now, I'm not new to planning. I think most people know in the room that I've had a 5-year tussle with a local planning authority, where 100% of neighbours made allegations of fraud. The parish council backed those and asked for a full investigation, but the planning authority rejected those.
I think, Councillor Povey, I would keep off the current subject you're veering into. I think it's not really appropriate for the meeting tonight. So if you want to continue on your main line of thought, but don't verge into historic planning issues.
Okay, I thank you for that interjection. My input in these meetings has now been stopped 3 times, not always on this subject. I was stopped on another meeting which was about why people are putting flags up in the village, and I had the audacity to suggest that it might be due to a perception of immigration not being controlled enough. I'm a bit concerned that this is the 3rd time that I've now been stopped. The point I'm trying to make is that I've got a lot of experience of a planning authority not listening to people. I won't go into detail about it. I'm more than happy to discuss it with anyone in the room or anyone watching online, but I think it's absolutely key that I've got experience in that area. I've seen the experience. Okay. Okay, the key thing here is that the SPD is a requirements document, and I think a lot of the content in it needs to meet the attributes of a good requirement. The requirements need to be clear, unambiguous, etc. I do appreciate the value of an SPD, as I said earlier, but it needs to meet its objectives. It needs to identify those requirements. The comments have shown that there are a number of more detail or documents that would contain more detail, such as a master plan and a design code, that haven't been included. And it seems that many of the responses to comments are referring back to the local plan. And my vision for this document is that it should take them forward. It should underpin the viability. And without a design code, a master plan, and a sustainability strategy, I don't see it doing that. The viability at the time of the local plan was assessed as being marginal at best, and that was with the railway station. And I really think the viability should be readdressed in the document before us. It uses a lot of buzzwords. It talks about landscape-led design, and I appreciate you can look to see what that means, but it feels as though it's being used with a buzzword without further detail below that. It talks about 5,000 jobs. I would like to see that evidence-based. My concern is there could be 5,000 jobs, and it's full of suggestions that would make it self-contained and not need people to travel. But I haven't seen any evidence that the 5,000 jobs there would pay a salary adequate to support a mortgage to buy those properties. I'm also conscious that the SPD for Lidsing, I think it gives the same area, 14 hectares, considerably less jobs. Is it 2,000, 3,000? Considerably less, I think. So how is this one delivering twice the number of jobs in the same area? I'd also like to see some evidence-based sort of demographic breakdown of market demand to understand who's going to buy these houses. There's too many comments in the SPD, or too many responses in the SPD that says it takes forward the requirements of the local plan, LPR SP4A. Taking forward or carrying forward is often used. It's different to advancing, developing, embellishing, or detailing. The station itself, I've spoken to South East Railway. They actually contacted me about something different, and I asked them about commitment to Heathlands while I was talking to them, and they told me that modelling is required, and that hasn't been done yet. And my concern is that one of the key principles about this development is that it's self-contained, and if it's self-contained and people don't need to travel, how are we going to justify to South East Railways that there's going to be the demand for customers? And as I said earlier, I think the budget for it is going to be considerably higher than we're currently being told. So, I mean, when the local plan was reviewed, the inspector made a number of comments, and I think we need to go back over those comments and to see which ones have been answered and which ones haven't. We heard earlier about healthcare, and we know that William Harvey Hospital yesterday, we heard earlier, called a clinical emergency yesterday. They were asking only people with life-threatening conditions to go to A&E. What's the long-term plan there? And do we really want to build 5,000 houses for people that can't go to hospital if they broke their arm? I won't go into all the detail, but things like wastewater has already been mentioned. Operation Brock, we haven't, you know, it's mentioned in the SPD, but no real firm commitment, no alternatives from anybody on that. And also access to the M20, of course. It's a long way from junctions 8 and 9. It's going to cause a lot of strain on the A20. So many issues are mentioned, but they're lacking mitigation. I'm not seeing mitigation. And the other key thing, of course, is impact on surrounding neighbourhoods. I was in Lenham Square this morning, and I was sort of wondering what the impact's going to be with 5,000 houses just up the road. How are you going to be able to park in Lenham? What impact would it have? I look around some of the antique shops today, lovely little, you know, it's a medieval village, and what's the impact going to be on Lenham, the surrounding roads and villages? Now, I live in one of the back roads from Harwich that goes up towards Headcorn. And I see in the morning and the evening for a single track road, a lot of traffic going to and from Headcorn. And it's because the rail service from Headcorn is sufficiently better than it is from Harwich. And I really fear that with lorries carrying sewage, lorries carrying sand from the quarry, buses being diverted up those roads, and people trying to commute through to Headcorn, it's going to be bedlam. I see that there was a KCC letter today. There was also a video they put out today and some social media content. Can I ask that NBC provide a response to that or a mission statement? I don't know if that can be minuted, but if I could ask that there's a response to that. Now, you asked for people to comment on the actual comments, so let me turn. I picked a few comments out today I'd like to read out. The first one was the viability of the proposal was considered, or this was a response from the council. The viability of the proposal was considered during the examination of the local plan review and is not a matter needing to be re-evaluated to prepare the SPD. I don't agree with that. The viability was marginal, and that was with the railway station. And I think as part of the SPD, it should be absolutely revisited. And I noticed some of the comments. There was one, proper and detailed planning and ensuring viability and infrastructure. So someone was asking for that, and it was marked as support. I don't see that as support for the approving the SPD at all. It's making the comment that proper and detailed planning, ensuring viability and infrastructure needs to be carried out. The next one said, currently there are fundamental questions still unanswered within this SPD, which were raised previously by residents. This document should be amended to reflect the significant elements raised about transport provisions for health services and effect on local population, which has not been taken into account. That was marked, thank you for the support. I don't see that as a supporting comment. A DPD, I don't know why it says DPD, I think it means SPD, is a vital tool for planning officers to use in determining planning applications, but its contents need to be comprehensive and clear. Criteria to be met to fill each situation must be precise with no or minimal scope for misinterpretation, which is something I said earlier. That was marked as support as well. I don't see these as comments supporting the SPD. Someone else said, no, I object. This will cause difficulties for existing residents with regards to the infrastructure, GP surgeries and schools. This is already overpopulated area and more houses will have a detrimental effect on existing residents. This was marked as a comment, not as an objection, yet the first three words say, no, I object. Okay, those were all on the first page, by the way. Okay, so let me try and summarise a bit. As I said, we are steadfast against Heathlands, but it would be unjustified for us to hold up or to try to hold up the SPD without reason. I actually think there's plenty of reason, and I think we've heard some of the criticism, and I think some of it needs to be taken on board. I think we've identified where it falls short, and the gaps are identified. So, I mean, my summary is that we're told that Heathlands is unstoppable, yet the viability of the whole project has not been underpinned. That's a very dangerous position for the council to be in. We've heard from KCC. Local resident Gary Steed describes the SPD as little more than a woolly wish list. And on the evidence I've seen, I find it difficult to disagree. I don't know if it's appropriate to make a proposal already, but
You're welcome to, if you wish to make an
okay.
amendment.
On that basis, I would like to propose that option 2 is taken, and that we're proactive in making or bringing the SPD up to a suitable standard. My concern is that the whole concept of the SPD being sold to us is that it ties developers down, and doesn't let them just do what they want. But I don't think it does that, because it keeps referring to the local plan. So my proposal is that option 2 is recommended to the Cabinet. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Councillor Povey. At this stage, can I ask if there's a seconder for your proposal in terms of adopting option 2? No, if not, that amendment, I'm afraid, falls. Before I take the next speakers, I just wanted to again reiterate just a couple of points, because I understand clearly where you're coming from in terms of your opposition to the Heathlands scheme. But as I said at the beginning, it was agreed by full council in this chamber back in March 2024, when the local plan was adopted after having the inspector's report and so on. So some of the points you raised were incorporated in the local plan. So in terms of viability of sites, our ambitions for employment on the site, those global things were part of the adopted local plan. What the SPD is doing is building on that to actually see how we can take it forward with developers over the next number of decades as this project's built out. So I think just the 2 last things. You referred to employment. Well, yes, it's ambitious to have a target of 5,000 jobs in Heathlands going forward. However, until the project is starting to be built and until we start getting planning applications, we don't know what the type of employment particularly will be coming forward. We've all probably got ideas of what we'd like to see there, but at the end of the day, as with all things in planning and development, it will be led by the developers bringing their plans forward. And in terms of housing market demand, well, the demand for housing is agreed at a national level by the government, even more so since the general election. So we don't have a choice over the number of houses we have to build in the borough. That's sort of decided for us. And I think more so as we move forward with the 1.5 million ambition. So I think we've all heard your points, but I think in terms of where we are tonight, I'm not sure they're ones which help us take this forward. I've got Councillor Russell, Councillor Jones and Councillor Clark at the moment. So,
thank you. Mine was just picking up a point back on my favourite Appendix B, which is I can see that following the consultation, it's been added in the monitor and manage approach to secure an appropriate monitor and manage strategy to be overseen by a transport steering group, which the officer mentioned, but also it was mentioned about an infrastructure delivery group. So I wondered, could that be added as another one? It was mentioned earlier and I just can't see it in there. So is there a possibility that that could be added? Because I do think that's very important. That's my point. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Councillor Jones.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to say, obviously, Councillor Povey, you are new to the Maidstone Borough Council, and I appreciate that. But I think anybody can dig their heels in and say, this is wrong, this is wrong, this is wrong. But what we're here for tonight is to look at the motions put forward as per the papers. Now, I would suggest that if you had come here with specific amendments that we could have considered, that may have been a way forward, but you haven't. All you've done is said, I don't like this, I don't like that, and I don't like this, which isn't a way to debate. It's you're not giving any solutions to all the list of things that you think is wrong. And that's why I couldn't support your proposal for option 2. You haven't come to this meeting, in my opinion, with anything positive. You've just been dwelling on the negatives. So that's why.
Thank you for that. Councillor Clark. And I've got Councillor
Thank you,
Wilkinson.
Chairman. Well, I'm mindful of the fact that we obviously went through a large amount of time reviewing the local plan, and I have my own viewpoint on that and this site. But we've gone past all of that. My concern really is in this chamber, we talked about the possibility of an SPD around a year ago for a completely different matter. And the whole idea of looking at SPDs is because they really do bring in a level of protection and structure. But at that time, it was mentioned by officers that at this point, we're sort of holding off with SPDs and going for the big ones, the ones that are really important, that need to be addressing such things as Heathlands and Lidsing. So I completely accept that. And I think in option 2, it does mention the risk that if we don't have this SPD, if we don't adopt an SPD and we delay, we're at a time frame where we have to complete by 30th of June 2026. And I'm very mindful of the fact if we don't end up with an SPD, I kind of feel that we're going to be in trouble. So do we push it out and lose any structure or any sort of safeguards on what we want on this site, or do we go for something that may not be perfect? It may not necessarily fit with our thinking leading to this point, but I do think that SPDs are there for us to get the best outcomes. That may not be 100% in this document, but I think we do have to look at, where we've got to the fact that the weight was given. If the government inspector had said that he wanted to throw this site out, we'd be in a very different position. So perhaps if officers can just comment on the notion of risk if we don't get this completed by the 30th of June 2026.
Thank you for that, Councillor Clark. I was going to say precisely the same thing, is that we are time limited with SPDs. And it clearly says after the 30th of June, so 1st of July, you can't do them. So whilst I hear what Councillor Povey was saying, and if time wasn't necessarily against us as it is, there may have been some merit in looking at other ideas, but we can't, because if we were to do any more work, go out to more consultation, do the analysis of consultation to bring it back here. If you think this came to us, as you said, in October, and now sitting there in February, it would be another 3 or 4 months down the road, and we'd be hard pushed to get it through cabinet, and then it has to go to full council, doesn't it? I think this, it doesn't anymore. Okay, but we'd be hard pushed anyway to get anything agreed by the 30th of June. So I think we have to go with what we've got tonight, subject to any amendments anybody wishes to make. And I heard Councillor Russell refer, was it the Transport Delivery Group?
No, there is a transport steering group mentioned, but it was also mentioned earlier in the intro, and I think we should put in a separate row that mentions an infrastructure delivery group. If
right, okay, yeah. So I made a note. Okay, Councillor Wilkinson.
Just wanted to clarify, am I able to amend things which need expanding on, such as the affordable housing and etc.? Am I allowed to do that?
Tonight we can. Tonight's our last chance to recommend any changes really to the cabinet. So
okay. So regarding the 40% affordable housing, I think that it would be good if we could demand that the SPD explicitly prevents developers from using viability assessments later to reduce the 40% affordable housing target. An idea would be for key worker priority, propose a proportion of social housing be legally tied to workers for the new schools and healthcare facilities that will be required. Regarding the bus connectivity, the SPD relies on the A20 bus routes, but the SPD, I think, should include a fully funded high frequency bus service. And finally, about the bicycle pathways, I think it would be important to stipulate that the cycle path should be segregated from pedestrians and cars to ensure a viable alternative for families and school children.
Thank you for that, Joe. Can I just check, Cassie, did you manage to get most of that down? But I think what Joe, I paraphrase you just so we want a statement that the 40% affordable housing, that key workers get priority within the 40%, and that we will be insistent on 40% is viable in this scheme. I mean, that's what you were saying, Joe. And then we were looking at, in terms of bus service, we're looking at we want a scheme to develop a fully funded bus service. Was that was right, in addition to, okay, in addition to the current bus services. And the third point was that cycle paths should be segregated from other users. And I definitely support that last one. I know myself from cycling, fortunately, obviously, Councillor Jeffrey, after last night, the dangers of not having segregated cycle paths. So those, I think, are your amendments. Those are your amendments, aren't they?
Just a second.
You ask. You clarify.
Sorry, can you just clarify the second one? The
Is that the key work?
no, the one after that.
About the buses.
The SPD shouldn't just rely on the A20 bus routes already in use, and include a further fully funded high frequency bus service.
Okay, so we've now got the amendment suggested by Joe and the amendment suggested by Claudine. I'm happy at this stage to second both those amendments so that we can take them forward for debate. Could I ask if any members wish to add any points to either of those amendments at this point?
Had a proposal.
We've had two amendments moved. So Councillor Russell moved an amendment that we include reference to an infrastructure delivery group.
But was the original the paper, was the recommendation on the papers proposed for it to be amended?
Oh, okay. I from the chair, I propose the recommendations on page 113. I'll read them out. That the Heathlands Garden Settlement SPD Appendix 1, supported by the Transport Annex Appendix 2, Landscape Strategy Appendix 3, and Statement of Consultation Appendix 4 be adopted, and 2, delegated authority be given to the Head of Planning and Economic Development to make minor graphic, layout or editorial amendments prior to final publication. So can I see a seconder for that? That's the stuff on the table. Thank you, Councillor Conyer. Now that's been moved, we've now got the two amendments being suggested. One by Councillor Russell in terms of adding in the infrastructure delivery group. Secondly, by Councillor Wilkinson in terms of the points around affordable housing, the public transport, the buses, and the cycle path. And I'm happy to second both those amendments so that we can take them forward for discussion now. Yep. So that's in the right way now. So can I ask if anybody would like to discuss either of those two amendments at this stage? Councillor Clark.
I just think there's information that's coming to us sort of on the fly. So I just wonder what the feedback would be from officers if these were to be added.
was going to go to the officers if you'd like to make any comments on those two amendments.
Maybe if I start and then others can chip in. I think the enhanced bus provision is included within the SPD currently. We have got words about prioritisation, but I think segregation is something that can be added. That isn't included, I don't believe, in the document. In terms of viability, I think there was a mention about viability. That obviously needs to accord with national policies. So that's not something that we can deal with ourselves separately. Mark or Tom, did you want to add anything?
I'll just come in very briefly saying that it seems incredibly logical to ensure that we have segregation of cycle lanes as well in that regard. And yeah, in terms of the infrastructure delivery group mentioned by Councillor Russell as well, that does seem to be entirely logical. I think that would be consistent as well with what we've done with the Lidsing Garden community. So thank you very much.
Thank you. I look to Joe. So the officers are saying that it makes sense, obviously, for us to have the amendment around the cycle path segregation. And I think they're suggesting, if I understand them right, that in terms of the affordable housing and fully funded bus services, they will be subject to when the planning applications come up. And I think I can see Councillor Harwood nodding as an expert on planning, and I'm sure Councillor Spooner as well, is that that's the sort of thing where we can attach it as a condition to planning applications if the council thinks it's relevant to do so at that time. So I think those two items can be dealt with that way. So if you're happy with that, Joe, in which case the amendment then is just to add in the infrastructure delivery group and the segregation in terms of cycle paths. So can I see everybody in favour of those two amendments, please? Great, thank you. That's unanimous. Any last comments from any councillor before we move on? If not, we'll move to the amended resolution then. Can I see those in favour of it, please? Okay, thank you. Can I see those against? Thank you. Councillor Povey, would you like to have your name noted for the record?
Yes, please. I don't know if there's an opportunity to come back on a couple of things that were said.
Not really, not now we've done the vote, because there was the opportunity before I moved it to the vote for any last minute, so I'm afraid we've got to keep to normal procedure on that. Right, in that case, that's the Heathlands draft supplementary planning document done, and with recommendations forward to the Cabinet. I don't know, bearing in mind the time, whether people would like a quick adjournment for 10 minutes. Yep, I can see lots of nods, in which case we'll adjourn until 8:10. Okay, thank you. Right. Okay, if we can reconvene, and if I could ask, yeah, thank you. The next item then is Lidsing Garden Lidsing Garden Community Supplementary Planning Document, starting on page 517 and running through to the end of the brick. We've got a number of guest speakers tonight. We've got Councillor Spencer Dixon addressing us, and also I think Councillor Dines from Boxley Parish Council. So if I can ask, excuse me, Councillor Spencer Dixon to come forward.
Thank you very much, Chair, and members again for letting me speak. So I am the KCC member for Maidstone Rural North. So Lidsing is going to impact our community quite a lot. One of the main things I do want to raise is the spur road, the M2 junction 4. So the SPD and supporting documents make it clear that Lidsing will principally rely on a new or improved connection to the strategic road network at M2 junction 4. Land has been safeguarded for this link, but we still lack clarity on 3 critical points, and that's how the road will be funded, what its wider traffic and environmental impacts will be on the area, and how its delivery will be phased in relation to housing and employment development. Without that detail, there is a real risk that homes are occupied before the necessary strategic infrastructure is in place, and with knock-on congestion for existing communities, again, the ones that I represent, Bredhurst and Boxley especially. One of the other points I want to raise as well is that as KCC, we are the local highway authority and the body responsible for major transport planning and investment. I really must stress that we must be fully embedded in the governance of this scheme, and therefore we need explicit assurances that KCC will sit on the Lidsing steering group or equivalent, so that decisions on spur road, wider network impacts and public transportation provisions are taken with their direct input and accountability. So those are my 2 main points on this, but again, we really need to make sure that this doesn't turn into chaos on the rural roads. We all know that when roads get blocked, people like to take the back lanes. And again, it can turn into absolute chaos if not done properly. So all I ask is that we are involved in that and make sure that we can guide this with the wealth of expertise that we have in our teams. And that's my lot. Thank you.
No, thank you for those comments. I've now asked Councillor Dines from Boxley to come forward, please. You probably gathered you've got up to 3 minutes to address the committee, and it's the middle button to get the red light on the box.
Sure. Thank you, Chair. Yes, I'm Ray Dines. I'm the Vice Chair of the Environment Committee at Boxley Parish Council. In my professional career, I included 20 years as Senior Transport Manager with KCC, representing the County Council at various public inquiries relating to local plans, major highway schemes and development proposals. Boxley and Bredhurst Parish Council wish to highlight our fear that the phasing arrangements for Lidsing lack sufficient clarity, and this uncertainty will result in piecemeal development in advance of proper infrastructure provision. This applies particularly to the new spur road to M2 at Junction 4. The details of this scheme have not yet been approved by National Highways. Exceptional need for these works within the North Downs national landscape is yet to be proven. The bridge over the M2 motorway and its connection to Junction 4 is fundamental to the principle and sustainability of the development as a whole. It is therefore of vital importance that the SPD requires that any future planning application is accompanied by a fully detailed design, an updated cost estimate, and importantly, a detailed construction method statement. The logistics of constructing a replacement skewed bridge over a live motorway will be extremely challenging. I would urge councillors to study my detailed response to question 34 in the consultation document, where, based on evidence submitted at the local plan inquiry, I've raised significant doubts that the scheme can be delivered within the promoter's land holding. The nature and timing of the proposed east-west link between North Dane Way and the M2 is not properly defined in the STP. Councillors will be aware that KCC has described the current approach of not undertaking this work now as very high risk. Key sections of link lie within Medway Council area and will be subject to separate approvals. There is a real danger that the replacement bridge over the M2 will never be provided. The SPD must provide a definitive trigger for its completion. It's not sufficient to say that it will be covered by a monitor and manage approach. I fully endorse the more detailed briefing note jointly produced by councillors Vanessa Jones and Stephen Thompson covering this and other aspects of the development. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Councillor Dines. I now look to, I assume it's Councillor Harwood to introduce the report.
Thank you, Chairman. A number of us were present at Maidstone House on the 29th of January when the first pre-app discussion for Lidzing took place. Things are getting very real already. In terms of the document that's before us, for brevity's sake, essentially at page 768, that's where the proposed modifications to the supplementary planning document begin. 45 responses were received for the Lidzing SPD consultation, and they have produced those proposed modifications. Some of the modifications actually did run counter from organisations who were consulted, ran counter to some of the concerns raised by local residents, and officers have worked hard in the last few days to try and square that particular circle to work out how we can kind of deliver, but in a way which avoids some of the urban edge challenges which Redhurst already suffers from because of its proximity to the Medway towns. And I'm sure officers can touch upon them as they run through any other details at this point. So if I hand over.
Yeah, again, I think if I start and then I'll bring Tom in to pick up one or two tweaks that we're proposing as part of this. Again, as Councillor Harwood said, consultation exactly the same. I'm not going to go through the details, exactly the same as it was for Heathlands in terms of length of time, etc., etc. 45 responses, 217 different comments, and 30,000 over 30,000 words. So again, a lot of work to sift through. In terms of some of the things that have been mentioned, I'm just going to pick up on some of that and comment back if that's helpful for you as well. That's just been mentioned. Again, I think it goes back to a lot of these issues relate to the local plan and the actual designation of the site. So they've already been previously covered. Things like the route alignment phasing, etc., etc. So I'm not going to go through that in detail, but that is the position. So we can't change what is already in the local plan and been through examination. The SPD just provides additional guidance again to support planning applications coming through. So also in terms of the Kent County Council involvement, I hear what's been said there. Kent County Council have been involved from the very start in the stakeholder steering group. So from approximately November of last year, they were involved with the stakeholder steering group, and before that with officers meeting with us just to talk through different issues before we even started the stakeholder steering group. So they have been involved all the way through. And obviously we're not the Highways Authority, as been stated. So things like the Transport Annex work that's part of all of these documents, both of these documents, that has been prepared, and the relevant Highways Authorities have okayed those documents before we went out for consultation. So they've been before KCC officers, they've also been before Medway officers in the case of Lidsing, and National Highways in terms of the transportation element. So it's not for us as planners to comment on. That's the Highways Authorities that have dealt with those transport matters, and they're happy with the content of the transport issues. Tom, I don't know if you'd like to just come in with the tweaks that we're proposing as well at this point.
Yeah, as aforementioned, we found, I think, figure 30 of the consultation of the document. There was an anomaly when one of the sports provisions ended up in a woodland, so we're proposing to move that out to the woodland to the east, so that can be adjusted. And then also figure 31, we're proposing a tweak to the wording around the parking area in the land to the south of MT Junction 4. So it would read opportunity for minimal dusted gravel parking rather than just opportunity for dusted gravel parking. So hopefully pick up those issues.
Thank you for that. I'll now open this up to debate. I've got.
Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, I was going to come to you in a minute, Stephen.
I understood.
I was just going to say we've got the two board members for Boxley Downs. We've got Vanessa Jones, who's acting as a member of the committee tonight. We've also got yourself, Stephen, as effectively a visiting member. So I will take you. I'll take you next as a sort of visiting member, effectively, and a ward member for Boxley Downs. And then I'll come to Councillor Jones. So, Stephen, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. So I would like to commend to the committee that we advance a motion this evening that firstly notes with gratitude the significant updates to the more straightforward aspects of the SPD that have been implemented at speed by our officers. And secondly, that further work be undertaken on the critical matters relating to deliverability, phasing, cross-boundary infrastructure and off-site impact in a holistic manner, demonstrating how the relevant local plan policies can be fully and robustly implemented through the SPD. We've heard this evening from parish councillors.
Councillor Thompson, we haven't moved the recommendations in the paper. You're proposing an amendment to what we have in the paper. So just so that in terms of picking up the point which was raised, I think, earlier by Councillor Clark, I'll formally move the two recommendations we've got on page 518. Can I just see if they're seconded at this stage? Thank you. So they've been seconded. So now now they've been moved and seconded. We can take amendments to them. So, but Councillor Thompson, yeah, that's true. Thank you, Cassie. As you're not a member of the committee, you can't propose an amendment. You can make a suggestion to us, but the only people who can technically or legally make an amendment to what I've just moved and has been seconded are members of the committee. As a visiting member, you can speak, but not, and you can suggest we might want to do an amendment, but you can't move on. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I am relying on the fact that my earlier remarks were heard clearly, that I don't need to repeat them. So we've heard this evening from Parish Councillor Ray Dines, ward members, myself. You'll hear from Councillor Jones, an experienced transport professional who understands how major schemes succeed and how they fail. I won't repeat the technical details that's been set out at length in the emails that we've sent to councillors. Thank you for your attention. What this committee is being asked to do and what it's not being asked to do is very important for us to understand. Nobody is being asked by me to design or close a bridge, determine a highway network, or resolve a cross-boundary consent process. That would be entirely inappropriate. Those are professional tasks. They properly sit with officers and their brief consultants. But it is our role to decide whether the strategic supplementary planning document before us is fit for purpose and whether it gives planning officers the clarity and authority they will need when difficult decisions arise later, because they will arise later. The concern that unites the issues raised in our submission to you is not opposition to development in principle. That ship has sailed. It's concern about timing, sequencing and risk. If the SPD leaves these matters vague, they do not disappear. They reappear at the application stage under greater pressure and with fewer strategic tools available to manage them, which is why the phrase that I used, holistic manner, matters so much. The issues we have written to you about, the M2 connection, the East-West link, off-site traffic impacts, and a genuine green bridge are not independent of one another. Decisions taken on one shape what is possible on the others and when. Our professional officers, informed by best practice and recent inspector decisions, can properly assess these interactions. So what I'm asking is altogether more modest and important, that before the SPD is signed off, that the joined up work should be done on these more demanding issues to show how the local plan requirements are being robustly implemented, as Councillor Dines made very clear. Not just description, but implementation. So we're not talking about delay, nor is this the lack of confidence in our officers. Quite the opposite, it recognises that remaining issues are serious enough to deserve integrated professional treatment, not piecemeal amendment or reliance on later negotiation. If we get this stage right, we protect the communities of Bredhurst, Boxley, Detling, Walderslade and indeed Medway. We reduce conflict for future Lidsing community. We strengthen the council's position when hard applications come forward. If we don't, we leave officers exposed and future decision makers with fewer meaningful choices. So the suggestion that I made to you is very important. It draws a clear line between member direction and the solutions that we expect from our officers. With regard to the options, and particularly option 2 on page 523, Mr. Chairman, I would like to point out that 3.2.0 does not necessarily have to be followed necessarily by 3.2.1 and the remaining issues. There is no assumption that those things will take a long time. It is the 4th of February today, not the 29th of June. So the suggestion that we don't have time to fit these things in, even within our existing timetable, is to beg the question. And I think that it does not need to be taken that way. We can take our time to do this properly, because a good SPD will be better than a bad SPD, which is obviously better than no SPD at all. Thank you all very much for your support, and I hope for your wisdom on getting your support with our officers to look at the more serious matters that we wrote to you about. Thank you all very much.
Oh, thank you, Councillor Thompson. And I see you did mention the 30th of June deadline, because I would be concerned, I'm afraid, that if we were to go down more on option 2, that we would be in great danger of running out of time. I have spoken, and I'll come to Councillor Jones in a minute. I've had lots of conversations with Councillor Jones today in terms of some of her concerns, and working with her on an amendment which she wishes to put forward to tonight. So I'll go to Councillor Jones, and if we could just pass, if we could just circulate that. This is an amendment they've got. So Councillor Jones is going to move this amendment after she's spoken. You go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. I note the progress made in amending the Lydston SPD, and I do thank the officers for all their hard work. It's been a long and torturous journey, but I think that we are nearly at the end. However, some critical matters relating to deliverability, phasing, cross-boundary infrastructure and off-site impacts remain unresolved as outlined by Councillors Dines, Thompson and Dixon. And hopefully amendment number 4 on my list of amendments will address these partially. In addition, results from the March consultation have been, in my opinion, being cherry-picked by the promoter and accepted by NBC without question. The Transport and Movement Annex, section 5.7, which is at page 679 in your documents, states that the closure of one road in Bredhurst, i.e. Forge Lane, was the single most popular as a result of consultation with 22 responses. What neither the promoter or NBC have acknowledged is 22 people also voted for a joint closure of both Forge Lane and Dunn Street. The joint closure is strongly supported by the parish council. Accepting just the sole closure of Forge Lane will have severe and irreversible consequences for the villages of Bredhurst and Boxley, which is why we're pushing for the 2 roads to be closed. So there's no through route to onward to Boxley. The promoter is using skewed figures to determine that Forge Lane will be the Green Bridge, as the promoter's slides demonstrated at last week's pre-app members briefing, and has seemingly ignored the possibility of considering that the new bridge planned to be built across the M2 at the east of the development could also be considered as a location for the Green Bridge. The new bridge to be built will link to 19 hectares of semi-natural open space, which is adjacent to Bredhurst Woods and links to Quindown Warren. Also, the definition and purpose of a green bridge must be much more explicit than the current generalised comments in the draft SPD. To address the concerns raised tonight, I'm proposing the following amendments. Can I put those forward now?
Yes.
So the amendments before the committee tonight. So number 1, add to page 9 of the consultation statement, and this you can find on page 714 of your documents. Add to page 9 of the consultation statement under suggested options for closures, Forge Lane and Dunn Street, bracket 22, Forge Lane and the street, bracket 1, and delete combinations varied. Item 2, amend, and this is found on 679, page 679, amend section 5.7 of the Transport and Movement Annex, Appendix 2, to reflect the amended responses set out in point 1 above by removing paras 5.7.4 and 5.7.8 and amending the footnote in at the bottom of the page, footnote 7. 3, make the definition of a green bridge within the SPD more explicit, included expected ecological benefits and a minimum recommended width of 30 metres. And that is as per Natural England guidance. Item 4, amend the SPD to include examples of specific triggers and thresholds NBC expects, and to specify that these must be met rather than a hope or an aspiration, but they must be met and included in planning applications. Lastly, adopt the Lydston SPD Appendix 1 as amended, with any additional amendments proposed resulting from the additional 2-week focus consultation as appropriate, supported by the Transport Annex and Statement of Consultation as amended above. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. I'm happy to second the recommendations. Go now to Councillor Russell.
I think we need to probably take a 5 or 10-minute break because 1 and 2, the others are fine, more generalised. 1 and 2 don't actually relate to the main SPD document. They're relating to the consultation statement, and the transport and annex and movement annex is an appendix 2. So I wonder whether you want to take 5 or 10 minutes and work with officers, because you really, I mean, the section you might want to get them into is section 5.4 on, which is the actual SPD. So I just think we can't actually do that because that isn't amending the SPD. So
I'm quite happy because I thought we might want to, if we do an adjournment until 8:45 to give a chance to go through the officers to pick up the points Councillor Russell just made. So we'll adjourn now until 8:45 by that clock to go through the wording. Okay. Thank you. Right. Sorry, we took a bit longer than I said. Apologies for that. Okay, so I'm going to try to reiterate what I think Vanessa and I have just agreed with the officers, and they will come back if I've got it wrong. So on number 1, which is, you can see, add to page 9, blah, blah, blah. What we need to do there, we need to list all the options as well as the one we referred to. So we need, just for completeness, we'll list the other options. And then on number 2, amend section 5.7. And the transport and movement annex, because it's been worked on by the relevant highway authorities, and that's obviously Kent County Council, Medway and so on, it's actually their document. So what we would be amending, what we've actually got written to here, we'll need to read, officers to check with the relevant highways authorities if the wording can be amended to reflect, and then what we've asked for here. Item 3, around the Green Bridge, because coming back, remember, we can only do this based on policies in the local plan, and the local plan wasn't that prescriptive. So what we want to do on item 3 now is to amend the wording along the lines of undertake further work around the Green Bridge, so that the officers can go away outside of the SPD and do work. So when planning applications come further forward, they can have further discussions with the developer. And then item 4, we will take out, because there are some triggers laid out in the current local plan. So for instance, on the motorway junction and the spur to it, it does say in phase 2 that is to be delivered early in phase 2. I think that's the wording in the local plan, which I think probably covers the point we were trying to get across there. And I think we're happy. I think we're happy with leaving item 5 as is written here. So I just want to check with the officers what I've just said is what we've just discussed, because we just need that level of clarity.
Okay, I think happy with 1, happy with 2. 3, I would just suggest probably slightly tweaked to say undertake further work. Developers undertake further work so that they can come back with details of the Green Bridge as part of their planning application.
That's fine.
And also number 5, because it relates, number 4 is fine. And then number 5, it relates again here to the transport annex, and because we're not the highway authority, we can't say that. So that relates to the other comment.
Oh, we need to, yeah, that goes with the earlier one, right? Okay.
Yeah.
Cassie, have you got some of that written down?
Scribbling it down for me.
Yeah. Okay. So shall we just run through what wording we've got at the moment? Because obviously this is key critical for us well, if we are to agree these amendments. So what have we got down for amendment 1 at the moment?
You put list all options.
Yeah. Oh, okay, yeah. So all we need to do in addition to the wording we've got there on 1 is to add in list all the options. Yeah, so I've got that. And then on amendment 2, yeah. So we've got officers to check with the relevant highways authorities if the wording can be amended to reflect. And then we've got the wording here. Yeah.
I didn't catch the last bit.
Yeah. Do you want to just read it? I'll read it out. So on item 3, we've got developers undertake further work around the Green Bridge so that they can come as they come back.
So what was the last bit, Karen?
So I would suggest developers undertake further work so that they can come back with details of the Green Bridge as part of their planning application.
Yeah, and then we're taking out item 4 if we've got on the piece of paper. And then item 5, we just need to amend so it's adopting the SPD Appendix 1 as amended with any additional amendments proposed resulting from the original 2-week focus consultation as appropriate, subject to discussion with the relevant highways authorities. Yeah. Okay. So is everybody clear on those amendments? Yeah. Okay. So obviously Vanessa's moving it and I'm still seconding them. Can I ask if anybody, Councillor Povey?
Sorry, yeah, can I just bring your attention to number 4, which asks for specific triggers and thresholds? I'm not against the concept, but I would just like to draw your attention to the second paragraph on the KCC letter regarding Heathlands, which similarly calls out for controls and development on build out until such time as the railway station is delivered, which didn't seem to fully be taken on board. Thank you.
Yeah, we're not taking forward that number 4 as on the paper we handed out, because the triggers, as I said earlier, are referred to in the local plan, which in particular in terms of the motorway junction says it will be done early in phase 2 of the build out. So we can't amend that. It's quite clearly stated in the local plan. And that's the same thing, obviously, when we were looking at Heathlands. If the local plan has a specific trigger point, we can't adjust it at this stage because the local plan's been through the process, been through the planning and the planning inspector and adopted at March 2024 full council meeting. So, any other points anyone wants to make? If not, can I see those in favour of the amendment, please? Okay, that's unanimous. Thank you, everybody. Yeah, if we now go back to the report, is there any points anyone else wishes to make on Lidsing? Joe, I think you had a point you wanted to talk about segregated cycling again. Yeah. So, sorry, Donna. Yeah, you can go next.
Karen, thank you very much for introducing the item. I just wanted to ask something about what you said. When you said about KCC being involved in the stakeholder steering group, you said since November last year. Did you mean November 2024? That's okay. Thank you.
Over a year ago. Apologies.
Okay, so we're picking up Joe's point, as we agreed on as an amendment on Heathlands, that we should have as an amendment on Lidsing, actually. Another one around about emphasising cycle facilities need to be segregated. That's what it needs to say. So, if Joe's proposing that, I'll second it. Can I see those in favour of that, please? Great, thank you. That's unanimous as well. So the last chance, make it clear, last chance, anybody who wants to speak on Lidsing tonight, put your hand up. We'll forever be silent till the cabinet. Nessa.
I just wanted to thank all councillors here for their support and advice. Yeah, thank you very much.
Great, so I've now moved the amended recommendations, which I won't read out again. I think we all know what they are. So can I see all those in favour of that, please? Great, thank you. That's unanimous. So that concludes that item. And now takes us with our brick of paperwork back to agenda item 11, which is the National Planning Policy Framework Update and other changes to the planning system consultation, pages 30 to 76. Quite a long report in itself, but by comparison to tonight, a very short report. So over to Councillor Harwood to introduce it.
Right. Thank you, Chairman. I'll try and do this swiftly. Essentially, the consultation on the government's proposed changes to the National Planning Policy Framework, which are very significant changes. They're not tweaking. It's changing the entire structure of the document, and a lot of the changes they're proposing are quite profound. We've already talked about supplementary planning documents being deleted from the spatial planning toolkit. They're talking about removing discretion for 20% biodiversity net gain, which would hit Maidstone Borough and the policy that we've got. And I think quite alarming for a number of us is a very permissive policy landscape which will be created for those settlements with rail stations. It's really quite a big deal. Tom Gilbert has come up with some draft responses to various elements. I'm actually meeting with Karen, Tom and some other colleagues tomorrow to look at filling a few of the gaps which are still there, where there was some more kind of detailed planning needed to be done. But I don't know if officers have anything to add, but really any thoughts on amplifying or strengthening or anything further we can add that we can take into that final refinement will be appreciated. Thank you.
It's really only a quick point, but
Officers want to say anything before.
Sorry,
Tom.
Sorry, I was just going to say, just to add, there's also sort of different changes to plan making with a spatial development strategy layer being added in. So that would be a layer above our local plan layer. So there would be implications on the local plan making process, where that would direct certain things in terms of growth levels, broad locations for growth could be mandated down, and national development management policies. So in terms of the structure that Councillor Harwood mentioned, we'd have plan making policies in the new NPPF, but also national development management policies, which could then supersede the local policies. So it's just important to remember those two things.
Councillor Clark.
Yes, the thread that I saw as I was going through this, which I really think we should be strong on, is the notion of off-siting, because there's lots of talking about off-siting biodiversity, net gain, off-siting affordable housing. I was actually working with a planning application where the promoter came forward and basically said we were trying to have a negotiation about biodiversity, and there was a real flippant, well, I'm just gonna do it off-site, you know, and you won't be able to do anything about it. And I think that we should be really conscious of that, because as ward members we actually have a lot of control over what goes on in our patch. But as soon as you get into this off-siting aspect, you've lost control, and who knows whether we're going to get anywhere near what we want when they start talking about off-siting. So I just urge that we really are strong on that point and make it known that that's you know, a real key point for ward members.
Thank you, Councillor Ross.
Thank you. With brevity, because I'm conscious of time. A question and then two comments on when it said that they're limiting circumstances in which the LPAs can require BNG above the statutory minimum of 10%. Obviously, we've got 20% in our current local plan. So would that fall away, or because the local plan's adopted, would it continue forward? That's my question, and then a couple of comments, if I may.
Yeah, on the 20%, it's not clear, which is one of the things we're going to go back on and just ask that question. Yes, we will put that in to just clarify.
If I could just also follow up on that, I do apologise. I think it's just worth elaborating on that. The assumption would be, given that the NPPF proposals have made it quite clear that the government will not accept deviation from their requirements, the development management policies, the assumption must be that when we respond that they will not allow us to continue using 20%. We will need to make it very clear to the government that we've been through an examination process and we worked very hard indeed for the 20% biodiversity net gain. It's something which we use regularly and is something which developers are used to in Maidstone Borough. So that is why we have worded things in the way we have. It is a real risk for our borough that we lose our high requirements. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, happy with whatever wording. Sounds like you're on it. So it's just something, that was my question. Comments was regarding obviously the railway stations, the new thing. It mentions on page 46, it says several stations, Beltring, yes, Yalding and East Farley. However, the infrastructure is extremely limited. The infrastructure is extremely limited at Yalding, but it's no different to Marden. I think that landscape has changed. I think when there was obviously a fruit centre and a packing centre in Marden, the infrastructure is fantastic for that kind of farming enterprise. But, you know, we don't have a supermarket. We don't have anything really different to Yalding other than obviously Yalding floods. But given that Yalding's got the new enterprise zone and a lot of employment, I think we're on a par there. So I think that might just be slightly historical information that might want a little update on that. And then on page 62, it's just a correction I think needs being made, because on the answer to question 125, we've got yes and no, and then not applicable for A. So I think we need to just choose yes or no. It might be no because that looks bolder, but they're both still on there. So yeah, thank you.
Councillor. Oh, sorry, Tom, did you want to come back on that and then I'll count? Councillor Jones.
Just on question 125, yes, it's meant to be no. Sorry, there was a line for it, but I can clarify that. And then on the rail stations point, I think it was around just sort of suggesting that those would be inappropriate because there isn't anything there at the moment in terms of, you know, these stations aren't they don't have any real development in the way that our hierarchy in the local plan suggests. So that was the point we were sort of making there. But
okay, fine. I think maybe just strengthen it with the spatial strategy as well then, because that's the only real difference that I can see on that.
Okay.
Thank you, Chair. Just wanted to thank Mr. Edgerton for his comments on 20% BNG. And I mean, it would be completely absurd that the local plan inspector has supported 20% BNG and then for central government to go against their own inspector. So hopefully that won't happen, and hopefully the high level that we have in Maidstone will be maintained. So thank you for that.
Okay, I've got a couple of points. I mean, I think we need to really go heavy around this 10% biodiversity net gain to emphasise the loss of biodiversity and ecology in the country over the last 20 or 30 years, or since the Second World War, isn't it, with changes in farming practices and development in urban areas. And that our 20%, which has been pointed out, has gone through inspectors and through the whole process, and it wasn't, I don't think there was any criticism of it. If anything, I think people probably might have wanted us to have gone further on it, but 20% I think we all consider here are fairly modest, to be honest. Going down to 10%, I think we need to tell the government that the rate of degradation of biodiversity in this country is probably running close to about 10% a year. So if we drop to what they're doing, we're actually going to be going backwards as a country. When, you know, our 20% does enable us, if not to move forward as fast as we'd all want, but I suspect it does enable us to start to be slowly moving forward. 10%, we'll be going back. And I think we really need to emphasise that. Couple of points on the housing. I'm not surprised in terms of densification in urban areas, because we need to remember most of the decision makers in the cabinet represent inner urban or inner city constituencies, which are where you would have much higher densities in the central urban areas. If you go to London or you go to Manchester or Bristol, but we don't live in Manchester, Bristol, or Liverpool. We're living in a county town in Kent, where if we suddenly go if we were to support this, we'd suddenly find skyscrapers being built in central Maidstone, which would be completely out of keeping with towns. So I think we need to really highlight the fact that densification in urban areas is not always appropriate, because the emphasis which we hear from the government is building up. And I don't think any of us would want to live in a Maidstone, which is on average 20 and 30 story blocks of flats everywhere. I, for one, wouldn't anyway. And I'm not sure we should, this medium development category, what worries me a bit is because they're introducing something what's not there now. And with the tenor going through this document, and other statements coming out from central government in terms of planning, reducing local authorities' involvement, you can see that the next stage would be, medium and large developments have nothing to do with councils, and we would just be reduced to dealing with developments of under 10 properties. And I think we should be very sceptical about introducing a development category which isn't there now. And my last point is on paragraph 2.17. Yes, given, I think most of us here would probably agree with the development plans in terms of oil and gas sites, coal and peat. I'm not so certain about substantial weight should be given to the benefits of mineral extraction. I'm just cognizant of the debate we've had here in Maidstone over the Kent County Council mineral plans with Oaken Wood, which is next to near where I live. And if we've got to be given substantial weights to the benefits of mineral extraction, it wouldn't be possible for us to really be opposing items such as that. And I think we need to understand and perhaps seek clarification on the types of minerals they may be referring to, because Oaken Wood, as an example, all they're doing is digging up green sand, which is then going to be pulverized and used in laying roads. So you're using what could be a good building stone. Most of ancient London was built of ragstone from Kent, and you're just pulverizing it. There's other ways you can get material to put in highways. You don't have to dig up, valuable areas of ancient woodland and so on to achieve it. So I really think we need to home in on that one as well. Sorry, those are my comments, Claudine.
Just one more bit, and I know you're going to do it anyway, but when you send this off, are you going to send it with a preface saying, thanks very much, we don't assume this is designed for us because we're a plan-led authority, we're on our second local plan review, our delivery rate's high, so thanks very much, this is obviously designed to build baby build or whatever, but we are actually achieving our targets and we have done that, so thanks. But we'd like to keep our 20% BNG and all of those things because we are a plan-led authority, but I'm assuming you're going to do that anyway. Thank you.
So I just wanted to suggest a tactic when it comes to the 20% biodiversity, and that's the fact that the government is keen to reduce the barriers in planning, and we hear this over and over again, that local authorities planning groups are the barriers to growth and development. What we should do is frame that in a way where we say that developments in Maidstone, we can definitely find some examples that have delivered 20% biodiversity on site, are much better schemes, and they bring forward much less opposition. Because I know I can think of a couple where you go to the parish council and there's a couple of things they want, but overall they look at it and think, wow, that's better than we thought it was going to be, because you haven't got gable ends right up to people's back gardens. So I think that we could position that as something which could reduce barriers of opposition in the planning process. And we could give them actual evidence that that's happened.
It's very good. Actually, on any of the other points we've raised, also give examples where we've got some, because I think we've probably got good examples that back up all the points people here have mentioned. So anyone else, any wish to add on it? I think we turn to the recommendations, which are on page 31, aren't they? Which, yeah, 31. So it's that the Maidstone Council's draft response to the National Planning Policy Framework, attached Appendix 1, be approved for submission. And I think we just need to add there, subject to the comments of the Policy Advisory Committee. And then delegated authority be given to the head of planning and economic development to make editorial blah blah, amendment. So is everyone happy with that minor amendment added in? Yep. Okay. Oh, we better put our hands up. So can I see those in favour? Great. That's unanimous. Has everything's been smashing. So that then takes us on to item number 12, which is introduction of an exceptional circumstances relief policy under the Community Infrastructure Levy Regulations 2010 as amended, which is on page 77 to 88 of our report, and actually is pertinent considering the two big items we've considered tonight. So I'll ask Tony, Councillor Harwood, if he would like to introduce it.
I think officers can explain, but essentially the discretionary exceptional circumstances relief policy is needed to ensure that our adopted seal charging schedule remains aligned with policy requirements and the adopted local plan review. But I'll hand over and give chapter and verse. Thank you.
Good evening, members. Good evening, Chair. Hopefully everyone can hear me okay. Yep, as Councillor Harwood has just said, the purpose of the report before you this evening is to introduce an exceptional circumstances relief policy to our adopted community infrastructure levy charging schedule. And the main reason for that, as Councillor Harwood has already said, is that the adopted policies in our local plan review, specifically relating to Heathlands, Lidsing and Invicta Park Barracks, they require that those sites will provide infrastructure through a bespoke funding arrangement. Primarily that will be through Section 106, and essentially by doing that we secure a lot more substantial infrastructure that goes well beyond what we would ordinarily get funded through SIL. And what this exceptional circumstances relief policy does is just make sure that that is allowed for through our adopted charging schedule. Essentially, the process would be that once planning permission is secured on those sites, then it's for the developer, the applicant, to apply to us as the charging authority for that discretionary relief on SIL. And that is all subject to a viability assessment, and we are the ones who can then agree or challenge, but ultimately agree that relief can be given in these circumstances. It is explicitly limited just to applications and planning permissions related to those three strategic sites. It does not open the floodgates for any planning applications and permissions. And as I say, it really is just, it's more of a procedural, technical process to make sure that charging schedule aligns to our local plan review policies. Happy to answer any questions on it. Over to you.
Okay, thank you for that, Helen. Before I come to Councillor Russell, I just had a question. I think it's a really good idea to do this. We know the shortcomings of SIL. I just wonder now, I don't know the constraints of our local plan and the SIL adoption method we've got, whether when we have consider other large planning applications going forward, it would be possible to do a similar sort of thing where we would, or is it, oh, are we bound by the local plan that we have to do SIL rather than section 106? Is there any flexibility we could apply in the future on this?
So the exceptional circumstances relief policy, we could bring it in and not limit it to SIL. We are charging a SIL charging.
You froze.
You froze then.
Oh, sorry. Which part did you hear up to? So I was just saying
we wouldn't need, we don't need to restrict the exceptional circumstances policy to, and that's when it froze.
Okay, apologies. Yeah, we don't need to technically restrict it just to the 3 sites. However, that would run the risk that, as I said, might open the floodgates to any planning application submitting the exceptional circumstances relief form, and we would have to viability assess all of those applications. And really the purpose of section 106 is to it has to be directly related to the planning permission and the development itself. SIL is a strategic infrastructure funding mechanism that isn't related directly to the planning permission and can be spent anywhere in the borough. So they sort of serve different purposes to a large extent. I'm not sure if there'd be any benefit to opening the exceptional circumstances relief policy more widely than just these 3 strategic sites that are within the plan.
Thank you. I saw Mark wanted to add a comment in.
Yep.
Thank you very much. Just to be absolutely clear with members, the local plan review policies are what are guiding officers' recommendation on this very technical matter. There are no local plan review policies that at this stage would be conducive to other sites in our housing land supply or windfall to apply for this exceptional circumstances relief. It is written within the policies specifically for Heathlands, Lidsing and Invicta. We are simply applying that existing policy. So other sites, if they wish for us to consider it, unfortunately, our starting point is, would it comply with the policy requirement as adopted? And the answer at this stage would be no. However, as Helen says, it is not beyond the realms of possibility that we could consider it. However, with these strategic developments, we are doing what the policy has required and has been through examination to that effect. Thank you.
Thank you for that clarification. Claudine.
Thanks. Yeah, as I understood it, this was just for these 3 sites, and it's because they're getting a lot more infrastructure, and that's why you need to exempt them from the SIL, because they're getting the stuff from the and all the SPDs. I do think there's something that we should look at in the future. It's not for tonight, but I know there was one that went through planning recently, a Cox Heath site that flipped back from section 106 to SIL because we're a dual charging authority, and they said, actually, we're not going to go down that route anymore. We'll go down SIL. And there wasn't, because we are a dual charging authority, there wasn't anything that we could do about that. We just have to go, okay. And I think it's something that we should definitely look at in the future, because taking your points on board, Chair, I think, and the review we did through overview and scrutiny, SIL isn't really getting us what we thought it would necessarily do when we became a SIL charging authority. And a lot of the infrastructure providers were actually preferring section 106 because it was linked to that development. They knew what they would have to provide, and it was really prescriptive and a legal document that was signed. So yeah, I mean, but that obviously that's not for tonight. I think we should just go ahead and I propose as per the papers. Thank you.
Councillor Conyer. Oh, sorry. Just thinking of what Councillor Russell just said. I'm just thinking how, because we want it to be taken forward, that point, don't we, about looking at still in section 106. Did we? Okay. So I'm looking to the officers, when we start work on the local plan, whatever you want to call it, version 3, that we want that to be something to be borne in mind, yeah?
Very much. Thank you very much indeed.
So can I just see everybody in favour of the recommendation as moved and proposed? Great. Okay, it's unanimous. Thank you, everyone. I haven't pressed the button. Or do I have to say all that again? We're now going on to item 13, Swale Borough Council, and I'm looking to Tony to introduce it.
Yeah, thank you. Swale Borough Council undertaking their Regulation 18 consultation, which closes on the 23rd of February. The report starts on page 89 and includes Appendix 1, which sets out the proposed suggestions that we feed back to Swale Borough Council. Thank you.
Right, I'm looking if anybody wishes to. No.
I'll
Okay.
propose as per the papers. Let's send it.
Yeah. Okay. Is that seconded? Yeah. Okay. Did you want to speak? Yeah. Oh, okay. I mean, I'll just say one very quick thing. I think this shows Swale's going to run into the problems with his new local, the new national planning policy framework, every way around it is, because they haven't identified sites at this stage. So by the time they move on to identifying sites, they're going to be nobbled by what the government's about to bring through. Well, I mean, we can do it, it's down to them, but they're sort of stuffed themselves, really, haven't they? But anyway, that's a technical term, yeah, it's for the minutes. Okay, so let's just see everybody in favour of the recommendation. Great, that's unanimous, and thanks everybody for tonight. We've managed to get through it in 3 hours, which was quite good for this paper.